What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be comparing a high school quarterback's throwing motion where he makes one of the biggest mistakes that high school and youth quarterbacks will make to an NFL quarterback's throwing motion, who is honestly a pretty perfect motion. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a quarterback and would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 15 states across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So check out that very first link in the description below if you'd like some more information on how you can sign up for one of our events. We're going to be coming out to San Francisco, Miami, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Portland, Dallas, Nashville, Chicago, Buffalo, Atlanta, Houston, Philly, Detroit, Boise, and Los Angeles. So again, if you guys want some more information, want to learn how you can sign up, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get started with this video. So how many of you guys as a quarterback have been taught when you are in your stance to push off of this back foot and you want to push in the direction of the target to be able to generate some power? Now, here's the thing, fellas. We are not pitchers, okay? Quarterbacks and pitchers have two very different mechanical motions and mechanical sequences, and that's what we're going to be focused on today. Now, listen, quarterbacks, pitchers and quarterbacks generate power using the exact same muscle groups, right? They generate power using their legs, their hips, their core. They need to have a loose rotator cuff. All those things we have in common as quarterbacks with pitchers. Here's the difference between quarterbacks and pitchers. We are not throwing off of a mound. We are throwing a heavier ball, and we have to throw to a moving target that is further away than a catcher holding out his glove. So accuracy and certain things having to do with your front side mechanics due to the hip rotation, due to proper leg drive, allow us to be accurate. But if we are throwing with this kind of long front stride, improper weight distribution because of this back leg push forward, that throws off my accuracy. And I'm going to talk about why today. So let's watch this throw from this high school kid. And again, it's a high school kid. Like, I'm hoping he's watching this video so he could see this and actually know what's wrong with his mechanics, right? So let's play this thing full speed. So when he goes to throw, you see how that ball's kind of tailing left, finishing low. You see how he's got this kind of like lean out of there with his upper body. All of these things are solely related to what his back leg and his back hip do. And we're going to be comparing it to Aaron Rodgers in a second here, okay? So now let's take a look at this. So when we are in our base, fellas, to generate power and to generate torque as a quarterback, you need something called hip and shoulder dissociation, right? So hip and shoulder dissociation is essentially when you take a step to the target, right, which is this receiver running this slant route. You want to make sure that your shoulders and your back leg is got some weight on it and your shoulders are staying back. Essentially, you want your upper body to go this way as your front stride is going this way. It's like hip and shoulder separation. Think of it like you're hitting a baseball bat rather than pitching off of a mound. Now, quarterbacks for so many years were taught to create linear force. Hey, you want to push off of the inside arch of your back foot. We've all been taught that at some point before, fellas. But when you push off of your back foot to start the throw and to create the front stride, you don't want to push to stride. You want to stride first, maintain some weight back here, then rotate. We want to be rotational athletes from my hip, not a linear force athlete from my back foot. And again, I'm going to talk about why in a second. But when you push off of this back foot and that creates that front stride, where does all of your body weight go? Your body weight shifts forward. So you have probably about 75 to 80% of your body weight all onto this front leg and all onto your front half of your body, including the upper half. So when your body weight is shifted this way, you don't keep any weight loaded on your back leg because you were pushing off of your back leg, right? Very similar to a pitcher. Now, when you push off of your back leg like this, you see how this back leg and this whole entire back half kind of is outside of the quarterback's body frame. That's because all of his weight is going forward. When you push in your shoulders, your body weight shifts forward, you have no weight left on this back leg to drive. But you're thinking that you're driving because of the back foot push. But here's the thing, fellas, as a quarterback, our power not only comes from our hips, but our accuracy does as well because we are holding a heavier ball and we have a further throw, right? When it's a further throw, we got to get the ball there. So as a quarterback, if I'm not generating power and rotating from my hips because my feet are wide and because my hips don't rotate through before my shoulders do, the only way you can get the ball there is by having an improper front side. So you see how this quarterback starts to dip his head out of there. You see how he starts to lean this way, the elbow pulls. He is doing that just because his back hip is not firing before his shoulders come through in the motion. You see how his elbow and his shoulder are ahead of his back hip and his back foot. That has everything to do with that back leg linear push. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, pitchers do the exact same thing that this quarterback does, and they're using their legs and they're using their hips. Guys, they're not having to throw a ball. How far is this? 5, 10 yards downfield? That is heavier than a baseball. They are throwing to a pitcher who has however many feet, or they're throwing to a catcher who's however many feet away, and it's a light football, or it's a light ball. They're not throwing a football, right? So if you try to throw a football and a baseball the same way, you are going to hurt yourself because it is too much weight and too much pressure on the elbow and the shoulder. We have to get my hips involved. But not only we have to get my hips involved for power and for arm safety, it is for accuracy because we got to get the ball there. So as a quarterback, you're a rotational athlete. You're either going to rotate at your hips or you're going to rotate at your shoulders. So to correct this quarterback's form, it all starts with the lower body and the back leg push. What I would tell him to do, and we're going to see this with Aaron Rodgers, like I said, what I would tell him to do, you want to get to the exact same base that you were in. Do not move your back leg. Keep your back leg with all of this weight on it. I want you to take a stride to the receiver. So just take a step. Just take a stride to the receiver. And as you take that stride, I want you to slightly rotate your shoulders and take the football back the exact same way that you do. Now, because he's not pushing off of his back leg this way, he's maintaining some weight on his backside. It's easier for him to keep his shoulders back, to rotate his front shoulder and to rotate his front side, if you will, and keep it loaded back here. Now, since he keeps some weight on this back leg, that back foot stays under his frame. Front stride gets down. Now, all of a sudden, he's in that dissociation position where his shoulders are back, front stride is down, and then guess what happens? Now his hips can fire through. If he thinks about then driving off of the back quad, not the back foot, the back quad, shifting his weight, thinking his front hip should rip open, that's going to cause that back hip to fire through before the shoulder and the elbow. So now he's generating power at his legs and his hips. He's rotating from his legs and his hips, and that hip will be coming through before the elbow and before the shoulder. But can't do that when we're pushing off the back leg and all your body weight goes forward, right? That's why he dips with the front side. If he's able to do that with his hips and with his legs, that front side lean, that front side dip will go away because he has the proper sequence and hip rotation. He's generating power the correct way, so he doesn't need to dip, doesn't need to swing the elbow. Okay, so fellas, I hope that makes sense. So now we're going to compare that to Aaron Rodgers' throw motion, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Because, again, a lot of people say, oh, don't try to mimic Aaron Rodgers. I think you could absolutely. You don't want to, again. And because he's swinging this front side, that's why the ball is missing left like that, fellas. When your whole body is leaning out, your release point, see what his release point does? See how his release point's outside of his body frame and coming across his body? See how it's going this way? That is because he's not rotating at those hips. That's why it's important that we don't dip my head and dip my shoulder because it affects accuracy. It affects your release point coming across your body. Now, going back to Aaron Rodgers, like I said, you shouldn't try. So a lot of people say don't try to mimic him. I don't think you should mimic any quarterback. I think you want to take the mechanical positives from the best throwers of the football in the world, NFL quarterbacks, and see what they all have in common and try to apply that to your game. And that's what Aaron Rodgers has. That's what Patrick Mahomes has. Josh Allen. They all have that hip rotation timing and that back leg weight in their upper body staying back on the foot strike, aka dissociation. So let's talk about this. So comes off this throw, watch his base. Same base as the last kid, but I want you to pay attention. His hips are rotating. His back hip is firing through before the ball comes through. Let's talk about his motion. So base, same exact base as the last kid, the last quarterback. The only difference is Rodgers does not push off of this inside arch of his back foot to start the throw. The front stride starts the throw. If you want to think about your throwing sequence, it should be weight is loaded onto that back leg, 70%. You stride first while you maintain weight. As you stride, you take the football back. Then the hips rip through, then the shoulders, then the ball. It should happen in that order. It should be base, stride, hips, shoulders, ball. Ball is trailing behind. That's how we generate torque, and that's how you use your hips. But remember the key things that we had to say. When that foot strike makes contact with the ground, you see how it's making contact with the ground. What do your shoulders have to do? Your shoulders have to go back. That's called dissociation, right? But notice how his back foot is still firmly into the grass. He still has 70% of his weight loaded on his back leg. That allows him to stay back on the ball. He's essentially staying behind his front stride. So now when his front stride gets down, what has to go through next? His hips. But because he was able to close those shoulders due to keeping weight on his back leg on the front stride, watch what happens. His hips are able to fire through. His front hip is starting to rotate open. His back hip comes open. And you see how this back hip is going through before the shoulder and before the elbow. That's where we want to be, fellas. That takes pressure off of the arm, and that allows us to stay disciplined right here. You see how Rodgers, when he throws, look at his head. Head doesn't move. His hand stays up by his chest. He's not pulling his elbow down. He's not leaning out of the throw. And look at his release point. It stays inside of his body frame. It's not way out here to the right. And so he could just snap his wrist and extend because he's not dipping. He's not swinging his elbow and all of that. The reason why he's not doing that is because he's able to rotate through with his hips on time and have the proper throwing sequence. Guys, when you look at all top NFL quarterbacks, they all have that in common, right? You could compare and contrast it all day long. They all have stride happens, weight stays back. As the weight's staying back, you close the shoulders. So now it's time to rotate with your hips. The hips bring the shoulders through. The hips bring the elbow and the ball through. And the ball is the last thing to come through in the throwing sequence. You could actually stay disciplined with your front side. How many quarterback coaches have told you to, hey, keep your hand up by your collarbone. Hey, don't lean out of there with your head. But they fail to mention that the legs and the hips allow you to keep your hand up by your face and your head not dipping out of the throw. If they're just telling you to stop dipping and stop swinging your elbow down, it's freaking horrible advice. Terrible advice. What's good advice is let's start with the legs. Let's figure out the lower half and how we could generate power efficiently. So you keeping your hand up by your collarbone or not dipping your head out of the throw doesn't feel insanely awkward and like you don't have any power on the ball. It starts with the feet, fellas. It starts with the kinetic chain and starts with the throwing sequence. So let's watch the thing again one more time from Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to show both motions so you guys can see. Remember, we don't want to be linear. We're not pitchers. If we start to pitch with my lower half, your upper body's going to be flawed. If we start to rotate with my lower half, my upper body can be controlled, I can be more consistent, and my release point can actually extend, and I'll be a more accurate / efficient passer. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches in 15 different cities this offseason, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season camps. I'll see you guys next time.